Boom, and we are finally on air after 10 minutes of trying to figure it out. We finally done it. Josh Collacchi's, I guess his internet went out. He claimed people were drilling in the ground by his house earlier. Our conspiracy theory is he just didn't feel like talking to us today. But regardless, Collacchi is not with us. It's just going to be the three of us today. And we got an interesting slate coming up. It's really not a good one for pitching. But before we get into it, welcome to the Daily Fantasy Pivot on RotoCurve. We, of course, a show aimed to teach you guys how to play daily fantasy baseball. Don't forget to check out, we got an MLB free roll this Friday. That one is being held through DraftKings. And then, of course, we have this RotoCurve $22 refund promo at Fantasy Draft. There's a $15,000 contest this Friday. And if you're a new user, you sign up, you deposit, and you play the $22 contest, and you don't win money with that $22 entry, you'll get your money back. So you literally can't lose. So check out those two great promos. Now that we've gone through that, Benny, it is a interesting day today, not just in baseball, but in the news cycle, because Harriet Tubman's going to be the new face on the $20 bill. Now, I just asked this on Twitter. If you were going to put one MLB player on some money, a guy who's been consistently money for you, who would that guy be and why?
It would be Matt Carpenter because of his cash game prowess for me, at least last season. This season it hasn't been as great, but last season it was like printing money. So either him or Cesar Hernandez would be the guys that I would have to go with.
There's actually a great response that just came in through Twitter. Guy says, I'd create a $5,000 bill, and Bryce would be on that wearing his Make Baseball Fun Again hat. Now, if that isn't a good answer, I don't know what is. Nick, he went with a Cardinal, so he kind of took your response. But who would be yours if you were going to make some money with a baseball player on it?
Oh, it's so easy. Bryce Harper, 100%.
That seems to be everyone's go-to answer. Me as a Cub fan, I'm a little biased, also because I bought into Jake Arrieta's season like pretty much in the beginning third of last year, so I just rode his coattails all the way along, especially in Wrigley, where he was just absolutely dominant. Jake Arrieta, probably in his mustache onesie, would be who I'd put on the face of money. That would be freaking sweet. If we could put Harriet Tubman on it, we can do anything. But let's get into the slate today, because I mean, you look at these pitchers, and it's not like we don't have good names, Benny. We got names like Bumgarner, we've got Chris Archer. Who else we have? We have Zach Greinke, but just none of them are really in the greatest of spots.
No, I'm actually looking to save a little money at starting pitcher today. I'm going down to like that second tier. Guys like Joe Ross for the Nationals against the Marlins, I like. Guys like Jimmy Nelson against the Twins because they're the Twins, and because I just want to be able to say I played Slippin' Jimmy Nelson after the Better Call Saul finale yesterday. And even Ubaldo Jimenez, he's really tough at home, and the Blue Jays have some really bad numbers against him lifetime. He's always pitched pretty well against the Blue Jays, so I'd rather save money and come down to some of those guys. If I was going to spend up on one of the expensive options, for me, it'd probably be Madison Bumgarner, but, like you said, I mean, Arizona's a pretty good hitting team. You don't really want to mess with them. Zach Greinke doesn't really look right. You don't want to take him against the Giants. There's two other guys that were expensive. Yeah, Archer against Boston, and he hasn't pitched all that well lately. And then who's the other expensive guy I'm missing? There's one other guy that you can pay up for today.
Did you say Greinke?
Hamels, yeah. And then Cole Hamels, who's a lefty going up against a, very righty-heavy Houston Astros lineup, which is what he usually struggles with too. So, none of the guys that are all that expensive are really super appealing to me. So I think it's a day where I'd rather save a little bit of money, come down to that second tier, the guys, right below them, and then use that money to pay up on some bets.
Yeah, Benny, I took German in high school, so I'm not a connoisseur on Spanish by any means, but I think when there's a J, it's kind of a soft J, like jogging, you know what I'm saying? So I don't think it's Jimenez, I think it's pronounced Jimenez, just as, just to go to my Ricky Bobby notes of pronunciation.
That shit doesn't even sound right.
Well, there you go, Nick. Starting pitcher, very difficult. He named some of the names. I'm actually in a little bit of disagreement with him, but I want your take first on the position before I get into it.
Yeah, I really was just looking at all these guys, and I just plugged in Madison stop right off the top. I'm just moving on and going in bats tonight. That Bumgarner's going to be pretty chalky. I mean, if he blows up, he blows up. I'm not going to be hurt too bad because I think he'll be over 50% owned. So, and these Diamondbacks, this lineup just isn't like clicking right now. They have some tough righty bats in Goldschmidt, Segura, Tomas, Chris Owings, but none of these guys are hitting right now, and they're 27th in strikeout percentage against lefties this season, 14th in WOBA. So I'm plugging in Bumgarner at home.
Yeah, that's kind of my thought. Is I don't love Bumgarner today, but I think for cash games he's like a no-brainer for me. I think a lot of people are going to be on him for the first part, but that's not really the reason I like him. I mean, we look back to last year, and Bumgarner 1.94 ERA at home with a 1.92 average allowed and 4.15 on the road. And I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, he's playing in the same division with Coors Field and Chase Field, so a lot of his games are in bad pitchers' parks within the division, but I think the home atmosphere certainly helps, and while this Diamondbacks team, as you mentioned, has been hitting well against lefties, they have struck out a lot. So if they're going to hit the ball hard, they're kind of playing in the right ballpark. I haven't looked at the wind factor yet, which I'm definitely going to get on, but assuming the ball is, the wind isn't blowing out at 15 miles an hour, I mean, AT&T Park is certainly favorable. It's ranked in the bottom 5 according to ESPN Park Factors over the past 2 years. So I think Madison Bumgarner is actually worth the shot if you're paying up for someone. I definitely like him better than Greinke, who hasn't looked very good to me so far. Obviously, he can snap out of it, but I thought he was going to be pretty dominant against that Padres team and wasn't. And Chris Archer, I'm just not in love with. So on one-pitcher sites, I really like Madison Bumgarner. Now, you guys haven't really gotten into Joe Ross yet. Is that a guy we're interested in, Benny? Because I feel like that's the name I've seen thrown around the most today.
Yeah, he was actually the first guy I mentioned, or at least I thought I did. Him and Jimmy Nelson are two of the guys who I'm really looking at. I mean, Ross has been really good, and he's still pretty cheap. He's only around 8,000 on DraftKings. He's been giving us like 25 to 28 fantasy points a game, so 3 to 3.5 times value, really. At 8K, I don't think it's too expensive to pay up for him. Facing a Marlins team today, right? Is that the right matchup? Hold on here.
Yes.
Yeah, facing the Marlins team today, a lot of the bats that you're scared of on the Marlins, guys like Giancarlo Stanton, right-handed bats, the lefties they have don't really have a lot of power, so I'm not really concerned about them taking them deep. You got Yelich, you got D. Gordon. I guess Justin Bour has a little bit of power, but he's a big swing and miss guy as well, so I think he can get some strikeouts. The only thing that had me a little concerned about Ross is earlier in the day, and I don't know if this is still the case, they were actually the favorite in this game, which made no sense to me against Washington. But, that was the only thing that had me a little concerned. I think Washington gets some runs against Wei-Yin Chen, so I like Joe Ross a lot. I think he can give us 6 or 7 innings. I think he can give us 6 or 7 strikeouts, keep it to 2 runs or less, and, put up another 25 fantasy points.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Ross has a good offense behind him. It's weird because Bryce Harper, the lefty, actually smokes the crap out of left-handed pitchers. And right now, if you look at the numbers, they're number 1 in weighted on base against left-handed pitching. So I think you can expect some nice things from this offense. But the thing, and let me double-check this on Joe Ross, is that he just faced off against them on April 10th was the date, and I know Collacchi's a big proponent of this, that we don't like pitchers facing the same offense in a short period of time. Now, it's not an exact science, but, if teams can kind of get a feel for you and you're not, Max Scherzer or Clayton Kershaw, then once they've seen you, you're not quite as big of a mystery. So Joe Ross is a bit of, iffy for me. Nick, do you have any other guys that you like for tournaments? Because I have a few names that we haven't even gotten to yet.
I like Nathan Eovaldi a little bit. I know he's a heavy favorite for the Yankees. High velocity pitcher, throws a heavy fastball. It's just it's pretty straight. So if the guys make contact, it goes over the wall. It gets hit hard. He throws over 100 miles an hour, and this A's team isn't hitting right now. So I like Eovaldi for tournaments. He can rack up the case pretty easily. So that'd probably be the guy I like. I do like Joe Ross now that you guys mentioned. I didn't really think about him too much, but I know I called that Joe Ross was going to get lit up by the Phillies last week. It didn't happen, but, I mean, he cruised right through the lineup, and this Marlins lineup isn't too much better. So I'm fine with Ross as well.
Yeah, well, the guy, I mean, so for 2-pitcher sites, you go with Bumgarner. Now, the second pitcher for me is in question because there's a bunch of guys that I like. A bunch of them come with risk, and it's really little differential between them in my eyes. I mean, Jimmy Nelson to me certainly sticks out, Benny. He's been pretty solid, almost dominant against right-handed bats. And when you look at the Twins, Byung-Ho Park not in the lineup. Their best hitter probably is Sano, and the rest of them, even Sano is a righty. Besides Joe Mauer, really most of them are righties. So if Nelson can shut those down and, singles hitter Joe Mauer is the one you're really worrying about, then I'm not really that worried. But how about Ross Stripling? I mean, that's a guy who's kind of, raised an eyebrow for me because the Braves last year struggled against right-handed pitchers, but they didn't strike out. Well, this year they're still struggling, and now they're striking out. And while, Stripling doesn't even have as much of a sample that, my spreadsheet will show him on it, I have a minimum of 10 innings against the handedness for them to even show up. He has thrown 2 good games, and he is really cheap. I mean, DraftKings 4,900, Fantasy Draft 9,600. So he's the same price as like an elite hitter. As opposed to the other pitchers who are way the hell up there, like Bumgarner is 11,000. You'll never see a hitter above 6. So Stripling can get you a lot of bats, and I think that matchup is nice. Benny, do you have any interest at all in him?
Well, I mean, I'm interested in the price more than I'm interested in him, especially for a tournament, because it lets you go and literally take any bats that you want, and you could even probably fit him and Bumgarner with just about any bats that you want. Within reason, I guess maybe 1 or 2 guys you'd have to come down from the top options from. I really like that Dodgers offense today, so I think he's in good, he's in line for the win. I just don't know. I mean, I haven't seen the kid pitch enough. I know he took the no-hitter into the 7th inning in the first game. He was okay in the second start. I guess I can see it. I probably like it a little more than I like Bartolo Colon if you're really looking for a cheap option to be able to fit in some bats. But, I really just don't know. I usually wait for Collacchi to open his mouth and talk about pitching, so we'll have to send him a text message before I put my lineups in at the end.
So there you go. Those are our thoughts. The last thing I want to mention is that I still think Chris Archer has some nice upside. Some of the Boston's best hitters do have some BVP numbers versus him, but when he's on, he can get it done versus anyone. And I think it's just a matter of time till we see that dominant Chris Archer. So I wouldn't be shocked if it comes tonight. I'm just not willing to do it in cash. Does anyone have anything else to say about pitching?
Yeah, actually, Joe Ross is even cheaper than Ross Stripling on FanDuel. I just noticed too. He's 7,500 and Stripling 7,600. So I don't know why Ross's price doesn't come up, but he's averaged 47.5 FanDuel points in his first 2 starts against awful offenses in the Marlins and Phillies, and he gets the Marlins again, obviously. But he's definitely in heavy consideration on FanDuel.
There you go. Let's move on to the catcher position. I think we've pretty much hammered that into the ground. And to me, there are some names that stick out tonight. I think there's a bunch of them in good split spots. Francisco Cervelli against lefties was pretty solid last year, and his price really doesn't reflect that. Is that the guy you're looking at, or you got some other names at catcher?
Yeah, he's definitely in the conversation, but I'm looking heavier at Yasmani Grandal and Stephen Vogt and Brian McCann a little bit more. I think Grandal. I'm going to target Julio Teheran, one of the worst pitchers against lefties you can imagine, and I just think this is a prime spot. We were going to do it last night, and then Teheran got scratched, and then who pitched for the Braves? I can't remember. Some other awful dude against lefties, and it didn't really work out. Yeah, it didn't work out, and so I think it's coming back tonight. I'm just trying to stack this Dodgers team. I love Grandal tonight.
Benny, what about you? Grandal, Cervelli, or do you like some other guys?
Yeah, I mean, Nick kind of hit on the other 2 guys I'm looking at too. I like Grandal a lot. I understand the case for Cervelli. My problem with Cervelli is he's the 2nd most expensive catcher on DraftKings. He's only $100 cheaper than Buster Posey, who I don't really like tonight in that matchup with Zach Greinke, although Greinke's been horrible. But you can go down another $100 and get Brian McCann against Kendall Graveman. I think that's a good matchup for him. Left-handed bat, hitting 5th at Yankee Stadium at home against a weak right-handed pitcher. That makes sense. And then you come down to Stephen Vogt, who I like as well. Eovaldi throws the ball hard, but he throws it pretty straight. Again, short porch in right field, left-handed bat, Stephen Vogt hitting 5th in that lineup on the other side for Oakland. So I'm okay with any of the catchers playing in, Yankee Stadium tonight. I also like Grandal as well, and Cervelli. Those are basically the 4 on the list. So, I mean, Vogt is the cheapest, and Grandal, you're getting the savings on them. I think I like McCann for the power more than I like Cervelli, even though Cervelli has hit well against left-handed pitching. He's going to be a little bit lower in the lineup. doesn't give you as much upside as the home run upside that McCann can give you. So as much as I like Cervelli and I know the numbers are all pointing in his favor, he's probably the one guy that I don't have any exposure to of those four.
What about the last one for me is Derek Norris. His price, I just realized, by the way, my spreadsheet is pulling from the wrong numbers, so I got the wrong numbers for prices today. So I'm looking them up one by one. But Derek Norris, 3,500. He's not exactly cheap on DraftKings, which means he won't be on Fantasy Draft either, I would guess. But Derek Norris is a guy last year who crushed left-handed pitching. He's confirmed fifth in the lineup against Jeff Locke. And I don't know about you guys, but Jeff Locke's a guy I love to take advantage of, especially right-handed hitters. So Norris is, because that offense has been so bad this year without Justin Upton, I haven't really gone to the well with him at all. But, I mean, these are the catchers on my list, and Norris is right smack dab in the middle. And if you go with a cheap pitcher, you can afford him. So, Nick, is Derek Norris on FanDuel an option, or are you sticking with your guys?
Yeah, Derek Norris is definitely a play. The prices must be just so out of whack because Cervelli and Grandal and Stephen Bowe are all right next to each other. Bowe's 2,800, Grandal's 2,700, Cervelli's 2,700, Norris is 2,600, and they're like the 10th to 12th cheapest or most expensive catchers. So it's just going to be tough to pick between all those guys because they're right there all together. And even Wilson Ramos is in play at 2,800, career 287 hitter against lefties with a 329 WOBA. Just hit a home run last night, so I think people will be on him. So I like all those guys we've been talking about.
I will say the matchup against Kendall Graveman has me going back and forth. I think the Yankees are either going to hit the crap out of him or they're not at all, because Graveman, I was reading about him, basically all the A's pitchers this spring worked on their changeup, and Graveman was already a ground baller type guy, so obviously when we're talking about the Brian McCanns of the world, we'd prefer him face a fly ball pitcher. But, the bottom's dropping out of his changeup. He's thrown 2 good games. And if he does the same in Yankee Stadium, there is a chance that if the ball doesn't go in the air, we could have like a Dallas Keuchel situation, who I know has been very good against the Yankees. Now, he's a lefty. It's a little bit of a different scenario. But Graveman's a little scary in the fact that I think he could throw a good game, even though I don't love his stuff. So I think you either are all in on the Yankees or you avoid them. That's my thought on them. Obviously, I prefer Graveman at home. Yankee Stadium certainly gives some upside to the hitters, but I just wanted to throw that thought in there that Rich Hill, Kendall Graveman, and some of the relievers are improved, and they say it's because of that changeup. But let's move on to first base. This one's interesting today. I actually think they're the usuals in play. Nick, who do you like at the position?
Yeah, we can talk all day about the usuals, but this one guy that it really sticks out every time the Nationals face a lefty is Ryan Zimmerman. He just crushes lefties. He had a 52 point something, I can't remember what it was, like 52.5% hard hit percentage across 2015 and part of 2016 that we've played so far. So he mashes lefties. He hit a homer last night off a lefty. Wei Chen's an extreme fly ball pitcher, doesn't strike many dudes out. So if you're looking for something to make you a little different, I really like Ryan Zimmerman a lot because he's never going to be high owned.
Yeah, and I mean, we just talked about the Nationals beforehand. They're number 1 against lefties. He's a big part of that. Harper certainly has hit him hard, but, we'd prefer to use Harper, who's pretty much the best hitter of our era at this point, or at least he was last year against righties. So, he did homer against the lefty yesterday, but Zimmerman's the preferred option there. I agree with that. Someone's hitting him hard, and a lot of it's coming through Zimmerman. Benny, who do you like at first?
Yeah, I'm actually looking a little bit cheaper than a lot of the guys that we normally talk about, because some of the guys that we normally talk about are in tougher matchups today. I mean, normally I love Paul Goldschmidt against a lefty, but, Madison Bumgarner is actually a pretty good pitcher. Goldie hits left-handed pitching well. Bumgarner is a little bit worse to righties, but, I mean, a little bit worse for him is still only I think he had a 225 batting average against right-handed bats last year, so that's still better than a lot of the other guys we normally see. So not really a huge fan of Goldie, but I could see the argument to be made. Same thing goes for David Ortiz. I mean, I like Chris Archer a little bit, and if he's on, he could be really good. But, Ortiz has good BVP against him, 9 of 26 with a home run in lifetime, 393 WOBA, 291 ISO over the last 2.5 seasons against right-handed pitching. So, Ortiz is another guy you can look at. And then you can go cheap. Like you said, you're either on Graveman or you're not. So, I think if you're not, Mark Teixeira, another left-handed bat hitting against a right-hander at Yankee Stadium, somebody else you can look at there. And then the guy who I think is just really, really too cheap for some reason, Adrian Gonzalez is down at only $4,000. So in cash games, I wound up with a lot of Gonzalez because you're trying to save a couple bucks to be able to come up to like a Madison Bumgarner or something like that from one of the cheaper pitchers that I was using in some of my tournament teams. And in order to do that, I had to save at first base, so I couldn't pay up for the $4,800 guys. But if you can get, Adrian Gonzalez going up against Julio Teheran, who's one of the worst pitchers in the league last year against left-handed batters, gave up a 300 batting average to left-handed hitters last year. I'll take the guy that's going to be hitting in the middle of that lefty-heavy Dodgers order. I think he's going to get a lot of chances for RBIs and a chance to score some runs as well.
Yeah, I agree with all that analysis. As strange as it is, I mean, I think we're in unison tonight. I think Adrian Gonzalez against Teheran, he's a guy who's struggled a lot against lefties. He's a guy who stands out for me, especially on DraftKings. A guy who stands out for me on FanDuel is Prince Fielder at only $3,000. Now, Doug Fister isn't a guy whose splits we necessarily look to take advantage of, but I just don't think he's the same pitcher he was in his prime when he had some good years for the Nationals. And then on DraftKings, Prince Fielder, it's weird. He's way more expensive. But I actually think you could go with Mitch Moreland, too, as kind of a pivot from him, even in cash games, as Moreland's homered in 2 of his last 3. And he's kind of always a difficult choice for me. When I like Fielder, I like Moreland, too, because, they're both left-handed hitters, and usually it's against righties. So usually I choose wrong. That's the problem there. But I think they're both definitely in play. And then you mentioned Teixeira. Yeah, of course, Graveman could go with the ground balls, but Teixeira's a guy with kind of an uppercut swing, especially as a left-hander. He certainly could hit one out in Yankee Stadium. You guys really just went down my list other than Prince Fielder, so I think we're good there. Do you guys have anything else to say about first base?
Yeah, I really like Chris Carter a lot tonight too in that Hitters Park in Miller Park against Tommy Malone. Not a guy that's going to strike anyone out. Carter's been pretty hot to start the season first 2 weeks, so I think he's in a great spot for tournaments if you want a guy that can hit 2 dongs tonight.
Yeah, I also think Lucas Duda kind of falls into that category too. Going up against Hellickson, I'm not a believer in this Hellickson turnaround. I know he had a couple hot starts to the beginning of the year, but I kind of like a lot of these left-handed bats on the Mets today. The Mets that offense has been just bashing home runs lately, so I think Lucas Duda is another one of those guys that has that kind of power upside playing in Philly, which is a good hitter's park. He could be another guy that you see on the Don list tonight.
Yeah, actually, there's 3 guys I guess I should mention because they're like Joe Mauer in cash games. I think is a no-brainer against Jimmy Nelson. The problem is I'm pretty much on Jimmy Nelson, but I think Mauer's going to be his kryptonite in that lineup. I'm on Ross Stripling, but if he gets hit, I think Freddie Freeman is his kryptonite in that lineup. And I don't like Bartolo Colon, and I don't like this hitter, but I think Ryan Howard against Colon, if you were ever going to use him ever, this would be the night, So I think Howard against a guy who's, pitching to contact, maybe he hits a homer tonight. As much as we hate using him, this could be the Ryan Howard night. So let's move on to second base. This list is a little more limited for me, so let's start with you, Benny. Who do you like at second?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Ryan Howard take was the second worst take I've heard today out of Philly, next to the fact that people were trying to say that was a good trade for the Eagles. So I just want to leave that out there.
Let me tell you that I am actually firmly on a hitter in the Philly lineup tonight. I'm sure you probably know who it is. It's not Ryan Howard, but there's a guy who I think is an absolute must-play in cash games.
Unless you're going to say Miguel Franco, I can't agree with you.
Odubel Herrera. I think Odubel Herrera is a guy on DraftKings and on Fantasy Draft who's an absolute lock for cash games. I think he's going to end up with 2 or 3 hits tonight. We'll get to him in the outfield, but he's leading off for them, so obviously he's going to see more bats. But I love him, and I'm going to be using him everywhere.
I actually have him on my season-long team, so I can't really knock him too much. But second base, let's get back to what's at hand here. You got Altuve up top. He homered yesterday, going up against a lefty. This guy hit 400 against lefties in 2014. Since 2014, he has a 426 WOBA against left-handed pitching. ISO score that's not too high, although it's been up so far this season. So I wouldn't expect the home runs to continue, but he could be able, to get some hits. Interesting note, he actually didn't have a hit against the lefty yesterday when everybody started him because they were throwing the lefty. He waited till the right-handed reliever came in to hit the home run. So, take that for what it's worth. But Cole Hamels is a tough matchup. I don't think it's a slam dunk for him. But, he is going to be the chalk. He is the most expensive second base option on the day. You can come down from him. I like guys like Neil Walker, left-handed bat going up against Hellickson in Philly. I think he's in a pretty good spot. I also like Chase Utley, left-handed bat going up against Julio Teheran. Again, we talked about how bad Teheran is against the left-handed bats, so I think those two guys are in play. But it is kind of a weak position, so I'm looking to spend down. If you're not going up and getting Altuve, I don't think there's any reason to spend over, a mid-range price on a second baseman, because I don't think anybody other than Altuve really is worth you spending up on here today. And I would only do that if I had the money left over to upgrade from, a guy like an Utley or maybe a Neil Walker or somebody down in that range.
Well, let me ask you a question. I hate to bring this back to yearly leagues, but Jose Altuve, pretty frankly, has been the best player in the American League so far. I mean, if you were in a yearly league, I'm just going to ask you this one yearly question. Would you want Jose Altuve or Mike Trout right now? Because he's been that darn good.
That's actually a really tough question, because I was making the argument at the beginning of the year that there's nobody in that lineup with Trout, so he's not going to see the kind of pitches that he sees. I mean, if I'm a pitcher and I'm going up against the Angels, I'm not giving him anything to hit. I have no problem walking him, which may be good for his stolen base numbers, but it's not going to be good for any of his other numbers. Altuve has guys like Springer and Correa, and then, even Colby Rasmussen has been great to start the year. Tyler White is a better hitter than I think people were giving him credit for being, so I just think he's in a much better lineup. So Altuve being on top of that lineup is going to wind up getting more at-bats probably by the end of the year, and, he is one of the best hitters we have in the league against left-handed pitching. So I hate to say it, but that it's a much closer question than I think it would have been if you asked most people at the beginning of the year. I may actually even lean Altuve right now based on how Trout has been playing.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that at all. I wanted to confirm that you would say the same thing, and I wouldn't be the only crazy bastard on this show.
No, I don't think it's that I don't even think that's that hot of a take right now.
Yeah, but looking at the numbers for tonight's slate alone, I mean, Bryce Harper averaging 15 fantasy points a game, Saltalamacchia 13.75, but he's in play every day, and then Altuve's third. So, I mean, Altuve's been a monster. I know Cole Hamels is good, but like you said, he still could be in play just because of his skill set. So, Nick, let's go to you after our Altuve conversation. First of all, are you on the Altuve or Mike Trout side of that argument? And second of all, who do you like at second?
100%. I'll join you guys on that side for sure. But at second base, I think in cash games, if you're fading Neil Walker, I think you're playing with fire big time, because I think he's going to be super high owned after his 2-home run night last night. He has 5 homers his last 5 games. Super cheap on FanDuel, still at $2,900. So I think he's going to be the chalk tonight on FanDuel. But if you want to come off him, I really like Ruben Odor for the Rangers. He's $3,400 on FanDuel. I don't really love his price, but he's been on fire in his past 7, bat 345 for the past week. He bats pretty low in the order, 7th, but like we're talking about with Fister, Doug Fister just does not miss any bats. I think this order could go through 4 or 5 times tonight, so I like Odor a lot in that lineup, and it's projected to be one of the highest scoring games on the slate.
I'm glad you brought up Walker, because I've been pretty bullish. I wrote up the Mets stack today. I wrote up, pretty much their whole outfield. I didn't even have Neil Walker on my list, but he definitely deserves to be there because I had some other guys like Chase Utley, who we like for all the same reasons. We like Adrian Gonzalez. He's likely going to be leading off against a guy who struggles against lefties. And then a guy I think you could, do to differentiate, not that you necessarily want to do it in cash games, but you could, is D. Gordon against Joe Ross, because I think the whole world's going to be on Joe Ross, and then if they are, they're probably going to avoid a bunch of these bats. But all we need is D. Gordon to get on one time, and he steals a base and he's worth his price. So if you're going Bumgarner and one of these cheap pitchers, you can afford it. And if you're going to fade Joe Ross, I mean, you might as well go all in on it, right, Penny?
We talked about. Am I unmuted right now? Yeah, we talked about the. Am I unmuted, or can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about this last time. Is if you're trying to win a huge tournament, a tournament that has 10,000, 20,000 entries in it, you not only can you not do what everybody else is doing, but you almost need to do the complete opposite. So if you think Joe Ross is going to be a guy that's 30, 35% owned, those 30 or 35% of people using Joe Ross are definitely not using any of the bats against them. So that's the way that you want to try to win. If you're someone who's trying to play on FanDuel and win your way to like the Playboy Mansion, or if you're trying to get your way into the the big tournament on DraftKings up in Toronto, you're not going to do it by chalk stacking, throwing in one bullet, taking the chalk stack and throwing in two pitchers and hoping you get lucky. You usually wind up doing it by going the opposite of the way that the people who had 20 or 30 lineups in there did. So you got to do things that they're not thinking. If they're thinking, I'm going to put Joe Ross on every one of my lineups because he's the best pitcher tonight, then if you want to win, you got to do the exact opposite. You got to take bats against Joe Ross and find another way to get up to the top to give yourself a chance. So it's definitely a viable option, definitely something you can do.
Do you guys have anything else to say at second? All right, let's move on. This one's difficult, at least from DraftKings perspective. I think for FanDuel, it's easy for me in cash games. For me, it's Manny Machado, and I'll start with you, Nick. I mean, Manny Machado against this knuckleballer's got the good BVP numbers. He's one of those rare righties who actually prefers hitting righties. So for me, he's just a guy I'm locking in there. I mean, he's been so good to start this season. I'm not even going to mess around. So what do you say at third base?
Yeah, I definitely love Machado tonight, but on FanDuel at 4,600, that's like the only good bet you're going to get if you're playing Bumgarner. So I didn't go that route, but I definitely can't argue with it. I'm on FanDuel, $2,000 for Derek Dietrich, who's been 6 against Joe Ross. Just makes too much sense for me not to play him, especially in cash. I mean, I think a lot of people on him. 368 WOBA against righties last season. He only plays against righties. He doesn't hit lefties whatsoever. 368 WOBA, 229 ISO. He batted 273 against righties last season, and he's batting 400 against them this year in limited sample size. So batting 6 for the dirt cheap minimum. I'm just plugging in Dietrich on FanDuel.
All right, let's even talk about assuming Bumgarner on FanDuel. I think Anthony Rendon's at least another option there. As we mentioned, this Nationals team's been very, very good against lefties in the early going. I think Rendon's a big part of that. He's hitting second, so I think he's a secondary option if we're going to, help those playing FanDuel. But Benny, who do you like at third? Is it pretty cut and dry for you in cash? And if so, who do you like at tournaments?
Yeah, I actually have Machado on some of my teams, and then the places where I needed to save money, I have Rendon. So I'm in complete agreement with the two guys you guys talked about. I really like Maikel Franco. I know, we talked about it earlier when you said he's the only guy on the Phillies I was going to play. I mean, this guy should have had a home run last night. He got robbed by Lagares in center field. He's about the only bat that really has good numbers on that Philly team, whether it's against righties or against lefties. And I do like, the thing about Bartolo Colon is he just throws fastballs. That's basically what he does. He's very good at hitting his spots with the fastballs that he throws, but he just throws fastballs. Sometimes, inexplicably, nobody can hit him. Other times he gets hit really, really hard. So Franco being about the best hitter on that Phillies team and the only one who I really respect, is somebody that I think, I think you can probably roll in there because Colon, it really doesn't matter, righty, lefty, he basically gives it up to both sides of the plate pretty evenly. Like I said, with him, it's just a matter of if he's hitting the spots. If the umpire's giving him that extra inch or two on the corner, he's going to take it, and guys are going to put bad swings on the balls the whole game, and they're going to hit ground balls. If he's not hitting those spots and the umpire's not giving him those extra couple inches high or low or on the outside, then he winds up having to live closer to the middle of the plate, and that's when he gets hit hard. So depending on who the umpire is tonight, if he forces Bartolo Colon to throw strikes, guys are going to start hitting those strikes.
Yeah, that's why I think you got to like at least a Philly hitter or two. Cash is pretty easy. I mean, there's only a few names. What about tournaments tonight, Nick? Are there any other names that stand out to you if, say, you're not going with Madison Bumgarner in tournaments?
Yeah, A-Rod sticks out to me. I think Kendall Graveman, if off the top of my head, I think he might be a reverse splits pitcher. And we know A-Rod can hit righties. He hit a homer off, I think, Jordan Zimmerman earlier or was that Mike Pelfrey last week? Mike Pelfrey, I think it was. But anyways, I like A-Rod. He's batting 6. I mean, he's kind of cold this season so far, the first couple weeks, but I like him in a tournament spot. And I also like David Freese against a lefty for the Pirates, batting 3rd. He's been hitting 3 for them in that lineup. 2014, he absolutely murdered lefties. Last year wasn't so great. He was still above average in WOBA and WRC plus and all those stats we like to look at. But if he can revert back to his old ways and he's hitting in that prime order spot, I think he's in a great spot tonight.
That is a good point with Graveman. 324 WOBA against righties for his career, 317 against lefties. So he is a reverse splits guy. That's an interesting trend to pay attention to if you like the Yankees. Benny, you got any tournament guys for us?
Yeah, I actually have some stacks of both the Mets and the Rangers tonight, or some mini stacks at least of both of those teams. So I do have some shares of David Wright and some shares of Adrian Beltre, pretty much because they bat in the part of the order where they're right around all the other guys that I really like to go along with my stack. On the Rangers, you probably have whichever one of the first basemen you're using because they usually bat third and fifth. If you use a guy like Mazzara, who we'll get to in a minute, if you want to stack up 2, 3, 4 in the Rangers order, you're using Mazzara and Fielder and Adrian Beltre. If you want to stack up some of the guys towards the top of that Mets order, you're using a lot of those good left-handed bats, and David Wright is the one who splits up those left-handed bats. So you got Grandy, you got Wright, you got Conforto, and then you got like Cespedes and Duda and all the other guys in that order. So I have a little bit of Wright and I have a little bit of Beltre. I think both of those guys are in pretty good matchups against weak pitchers on teams that I expect to score a lot of runs tonight. So I wouldn't be surprised to see either one of them put up a big number.
Yeah, the last guy I'll mention who's pretty obvious is Josh Donaldson. I mean, he absolutely kills fastballs, so I love when he's facing some of the guys who are pure fastball guys. Now, there's actually a lot of them on the slate tonight. Ubaldo Jimenez ranked 24th last year. He threw fastballs at 61.1% of the time. So Josh Donaldson above and beyond. When you look at those Fangraphs pitch values above and beyond on the Blue Jays, which is a very good hitting team as a whole in terms of fastballs, he crushes guys who are going to rely on that pitch. But, if you're looking in-depth at those numbers, Jeff Locke, Julio Teheran right there around him. So there's a lot of fastball pitchers tonight if you want to take it to that next step with your analysis. And, of course, Josh Donaldson hits everyone. I think we've said all we can say about third, so let's move on to short. Benny, let's start with you. It's kind of an interesting slate. Usually I've been the Corey Seager guy. I'm not so much on him tonight with his struggles. So who do you like at short?
I actually do still like Seager as a cheaper option if you need to save some money. If you're playing on DraftKings, remember you got Manny Machado who's available as a shortstop as well. So I've actually been rolling him on DraftKings a lot as the shortstop position. Carlos Correa is a guy that a lot of people use, but he's been struggling lately. He has that matchup with Cole Hamels, so it's the right splits with the righty-lefty going up there, but Hamels is a pretty decent pitcher, and Correa hasn't been killing the ball lately. But I do think that he's a guy that's viable for tournaments as well. But I've been rolling a lot of Manny Machado out there on DraftKings, and where I needed to save money, I've been coming down to Seager, who I think he's just in such a good spot. He's a solid left-handed hitter. He's good against right-handed pitching. He's going up against Teheran, who gives up 300 batting average last year to left-handed bats. So there's a lot that's going in the same direction that's kind of pointing towards him. So, I'm hoping that this is a good game for him. I'm hoping it's a chance for him to bounce back. And I do have some shares, so I'm hoping I'm right. Otherwise, I'm going to lose all my money.
No, I'm with you. I think there's a lot more to like tonight at that third base position. So on DraftKings, it's a no-brainer. Just move Manny Machado over to short so you don't even have to think about it. And then, you're looking at names like Alex Rodriguez, Josh Donaldson, and some of those guys as opposed to, Xander Bogaerts, Correa in a bad matchup, the Seagers, the Jonathan Villars. So I like that. I think that's the move on DraftKings. But, Nick, what's the move on FanDuel? Because obviously Machado doesn't qualify as a shortstop there.
Yeah, I wish I had that option tonight. I really don't love any shortstops, and I'm just there's three guys in three separate tiers, and you've hit on two of them in Correa and Seager. Correa is obviously the top tier at 4,200, and Seager at 3,400. I'm really landing on Seager a lot tonight, but I also like Eduardo Nunez at 27 or 2,800 on FanDuel. He's batting leadoff against Jimmy Nelson. It's not a great matchup, but he's hitting leadoff. He's been on fire and he's been putting up starting lineup. So those are just the three options I'm looking at, and wherever I have the money to play with and whoever I can fit in is who I'm going to plug in, and it's been Seager for the most part.
Yeah, I think we should mention Nunez because he's been hitting pretty well recently, and I've been watching him. I mean, this isn't your case of, BABIP and some bloops hitting, falling in there. He's been smoking the crap out of the ball. He's been hitting some laser beams, so I have liked him lately. But as we mentioned, Nelson with those reverse splits, it's not the greatest, but he will have at least a bunch of chances, and he's cheap. So Nunez, for cash games, I'm certainly okay with it. Xander Bogaerts is another guy against that the knuckler that that has a good history. So he's a guy that I'm okay rolling out. Wait, is that who they play? No, Archer. Sorry, he's got the BVP versus Archer. Yeah, the Knuckle is, they're not playing him. But anyways, Bogarts is kind of a lesser option. And Jonathan Villar is a name that I mentioned that I don't really want to roll out there, but not in a bad spot. But again, DraftKings, it's Manny Machado for me, pretty much both in tournaments and in cash games, just because it's such a good spot. Does anyone have anything else to say about shortstop? All right, let's move on to outfield then. Nick, I'll lead off with you. Who do you like?
Yoenis Cespedes is my guy tonight. He's the one guy I'm paying up for tonight. It feels awfully points chasing this Mets lineup again, but I think it's just a perfect spot for Cespedes. He's a reverse splits hitter, crushes righties, and Jeremy Hellickson's a career, or I don't know if it's career, but the past couple of years he's been reverse splits pitcher, and he's a fly ball pitcher, doesn't strike guys out. Cespedes is the first guy I'm plugging in at 4,200 on FanDuel.
Yeah, we're pretty much on the same page there. I like that whole Mets outfield. I think my preferred option is a different guy, but Benny, who do you like in the outfield?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you. I think you can roll out anybody who's starting in the outfield for the Mets. You got Grandy leading off. You got Conforto hitting third, who's been really good and hit a home run his last game. You got Cespedes in there as well. All those guys are in play. All those guys are people I like to roll out there. Bryce Harper, who we talked about earlier today, 7 home runs in 13 games. Even lefty on lefty, he's smoking the ball. So if you got the money to pay up for him, sure, you're never going to get an argument with that from me. Also really like Ryan Braun today going up against Tommy Milone. Left-handed pitcher on the mound. Braun 375 WOBA, 233 ISO since 2014 against left-handed pitching. He'll be right in the heart of that order. I think they'll score some runs against this Twins team here. So I think he's somebody in play. And then if you need a cheap option on DraftKings, I mean, Nomar Mazara down there at only, 3,200, I think. That's criminal. So he's just way too cheap. If you don't know who this guy is, he's a rookie for Texas. They called him up about, I don't know, I'm going to say maybe 10 games ago. More than half the...
They called him up on the 10th.
All right, so probably about 8 games ago, more than half the games he's played in, he scored double-digit fantasy points for you. And at 3,200, that's more than 3x value that you're getting out of it. So if you're trying to figure out a way to fit in Bumgarner today and you don't have Mazara in your lineup, I think you're doing it wrong. I expect this Texas team to put up just a huge amount of runs today against Houston. And, he's going to be the guy that's hitting in the 2-hole, left-handed back going up against a right-handed pitcher. I mean, I might be a little too high on him. You guys tell me, but you look and you watch this kid. I mean, he looks like he has power in his swing. He makes consistent contact. He's got a little bit of speed. I'm expecting this kid to be really, really good moving forward. And he's already really good now that they moved him up. So, I have no problem rolling him out there again at only 3,200.
Well, I don't know about you, but I put together a list of guys that I'm pretty much comfortable using anytime they're in a certain split, at least for cash games. Like we've talked about, last year, Cesar Hernandez against righties, Matt Carpenter against righties. This year I've added Christian Yelich against righties, and I've also added Nomar Mazara against righties since he's been up. Since both of them are pretty much criminally underpriced, I mean, Yelich had a hit in each of his, I think it was 10 consecutive games to start the season. He's cooled down a little since then, but Mazara is the same way. I mean, he's been really solid, and his price has not gotten up there. So for cash games, those guys are all staples for me. They're always worthy of consideration, assuming they're not against an ace.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna get no arguments from me. I've been using Mazara a lot since he's been up, and like I said, in more than half the games he's been up here, he's gotten me double-digit fantasy points for like 3K. If I can find guys at 3K that can get me double-digit points, that allows me to save the money to go up and upgrade a mid-tier guy that's 3,700 or 3,800 up to the top of the chart, like grab an Altuve or grab a Machado at whatever position I want to upgrade at. So yeah, I mean, you're going to need some of these guys, and I agree with you. I have enough faith in Mazara that I have him in both cash and tournaments tonight.
Yeah, it's kind of like the basketball argument, how we save those guys who are pure shooters for tournaments. There are a lot of guys who are power guys like the Chris Carters, like we mentioned, that will save for that. But then there's the guys with the safe skill sets like Mazara and guys like that in baseball who are pretty comfortable rolling out, a bunch of the time. I think you guys covered at least a few of the guys that I like, at least for cash. Ryan Braun is a guy that I have circled, highlighted, pretty much everything. I think Ryan Braun goes deep tonight. I mean, anytime he he faces a lefty, he's the career leader in weighted on base. That we have active against left-handed pitchers. Jeff Locke is a whole bunch of nothing. And I actually think people are going to look back at that team last year and try and target lefties against them. And while I wouldn't say they're great, I mean, they did get more right-handed, and I do like Domingo Santana leading off as well. I think you could use multiple Brewers in pretty much all formats tonight because I'm not a big fan of Locke. And I think the same can be said for, we already mentioned Cervelli, but the same can be said for the Pirates against lefties. I mean, Starling Marte kind of tailed off at the end of last year, but we're talking about a 370-plus WOBA guy against lefties. He was a guy who the first half of last season, anytime he played a lefty pretty much, he was in my lineup, and I'm continuing that trend this year. And McCutcheon's the same way, man. I mean, the two of them are kind of interchangeable, and I love that Pirates stack. Even if you're not going to do the Pirates stack, I think the middle of that lineup's going to get it done tonight. They're both in a good spot. So let's move on to tournaments. Actually, let me go back 1 second because I did promise I would talk about Odubel Herrera. That's a guy who I have as a staple for cash. I mean, we kind of mentioned Braun, but Bartolo Colon allowed a 285 average to left-handed hitters last year, and Herrera's hitting 293 for his career with a solid line drive rate off of righties, and now he's leading off, and he's cheap. So for that reason, I think we're getting multiple base hits out of him. I think he's a cash game staple, especially if you're spending up at pitchers. I mean, we mentioned Mazzara, but I actually think I'd rather have Herrera tonight. I like them both. I think they could both be plugged in, but those guys are in. Nick, who do you like at tournaments? Because we mentioned Cespedes. Who else you got for us?
Yeah, you guys are definitely hitting on everything I was looking at. Domingo Santana and Ryan Braun were going to be the next guys I talked about. I just love that Milwaukee Brewers stack tonight against Tommy Malone. I think Domingo Santana leading off for 2,700 on FanDuel was a near locked must play, I think. 369 career WOBA against lefties, 213 ISO, and he really struggled his rookie year against lefties. So those numbers are down a little bit from what he's been doing last season and the first part of this season. So I love Santana tonight.
Benny, what about you for tournaments? Did we pretty much cover it all, or you got anything else for us?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the guys I mentioned are guys I'm using in both cash and tournaments. Like you said, a guy like Mazzara, who's getting me like a consistent 10 points a game, is somebody that I like more in cash. Guys like Ryan Braun and Conforto and especially Curtis Granderson. I think all these guys are going yard tonight. These are all guys that I think are in a good spot to hit you a home run against the pitchers and in the matchups and in the ballparks that they have. So, all three of those guys are guys I have a lot of exposure to in tournaments. And then also, I mean, I haven't heard people talking about Bryce Harper today because it's a lefty-lefty matchup. If you look at the numbers, the guy can still hit left-handed pitching. He actually smokes left-handed pitching. Like, it's not even, his number. If anybody else had his numbers against left-handed pitching, they would be an all-star. But for him, it's the weaker of the two splits that he has. But he's still very good against left-handed pitching. So if this is going to be the day that everybody forgets how good Bryce Harper is, I've been rolling him all season to this point anyway. I'm not going to stop it now.
No, I don't blame you. There's really never a solid argument against Bryce Harper, to be quite honest with you. But here's another guy I like for tournaments, and I feel like I'm chasing points, Benny, like you said, but I feel like a lot of people are not going to be on this Astros team. And George Springer, I think yesterday was at least his third straight game with a homer. It was either his second or third, but I'm almost positive it was third. So he's been on fire lately, and, I don't think people are going to try and ride that trend out facing Cole Hamels, but we're talking about a guy with 370-plus career WOBA. I mean, everything off his bat against lefties is pretty much a rocket, and Cole Hamels was a guy whose numbers didn't change that much going from the National League to the American League last year. Cole Hamels did struggle last time out, and I think there is a small chance tonight that Astros stack does win GPPs, if Hamels is a little bit off just because his offense is so powerful. So for that reason, I do want to have at least a little exposure to him. He's not a preferred option. And the only other guy I want to mention for tournaments is Josh Reddick. Now, I am on the Eovaldi, train, but if Eovaldi's, going to give it up, I think it's going to be to a lefty. We already mentioned Vogt. I think Reddick's probably the best hitter in this lineup against right-handed pitching. And as much as I want to like Eovaldi tonight, he certainly is. He can give it up at times. So in Yankee Stadium, Reddick could theoretically park one. The last thing I want to mention is the wind is blowing directly out to center. It's only 8 miles an hour, but in Giants Stadium. So we were talking about Bumgarner earlier. The wind is blowing straight out. It's not that strong, but it's at least something else to continue, or to consider, excuse me. Does anyone have anything else to say about outfield?
I think we should mention Michael Taylor and Jason Worth as well. We talked about the Nationals being #1 against lefties in WOBA, so I think both those guys are in play. Worth, over his career, crushes lefties. Michael Taylor just hasn't found it since the start of the season, but I think both those guys could find it tonight.
Yeah, just one note is Brett Gardner before the show was scratched, so I think people want to know that if they want to use the Yankees. But let's get to our bold calls for the night because it will be interesting. Nick, why don't we start with you? Not much pitching to go around tonight, so who do you like for your bold call?
I'll go with the mini stack of Domingo Santana, Ryan Braun, and Chris Carter combined for 40 to 50 FanDuel points, which is pretty many on FanDuel these days.
Yeah, I love that stack tonight. I hope you're right because I'm going to have a ton of exposure to Braun, as will Benny. Benny, who do you like tonight? What do you got for us in terms of a bold call?
Yeah, and I don't even think it's that bold compared, based on the way they played and based on the numbers that Hellickson has. But I think the Mets hit at least 3 home runs tonight, all by left-handed batters, and I think the Mets stack is what winds up taking the money home at the end of the day.
There you go. I'm going to go 40 combined fantasy points for McCutchen and Marte in the middle of that order on DraftKings. That's about 20 apiece. That is a lot, but I think they're going to smoke the crap out of the ball. I don't think it's such a difficult matchup. Again, in this one, it's Locke and Drew Pomerantz. I think Pomerantz is kind of pitched over his head. I know they're in San Diego, but I really like Marte and McCutchen. I think it's a trend that people might have forgotten about since last year, but it was a trend I was playing every day. So I'm going to keep rolling with those bats against lefties. That is all for us today. Sorry we started a little late, but don't forget we got the free roll this Friday. That's rotocurve.com/free roll. Don't forget Fantasy Draft this Friday. You got the $22 refund promo. Again, you deposit, you spend $22 in the tournament. If you don't cash, you get your $22 back. So what's not to like there? Happy 420, everyone. Happy Harriet Tubman on the money day. And until next time, we are out.
Jordy Mercer's